Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter what time zone you are in. Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Happy to be here. My coffee is hot and my brain is, well, hopefully warmed up and ready to go.
Excellent. Sip and Talkers, you are going to want to buckle up for this one. Or maybe grab an extra large iced Americano to keep your mind sharp.
It's definitely one of those topics.
It is. Today we're tackling something that you hear thrown around all the time, especially in political arguments.
The slippery slope.
Exactly. The notorious slippery slope effect. This idea that, one small policy change happens and then inevitably we slide all the way into total chaos or control.
It's often dismissed as just a logical fallacy, right? The idea that A doesn't have to lead to Z.
Right. But our big question for today, which actually came from a listener, is this. Does that slope really slide forever? Or does it eventually, slam into a wall called the free market?
And that is a fantastic question, because when you look at it through the lens of economics, it stops being a simple fallacy and becomes a really powerful dynamic. It's basically a massive tug of war.
A tug of war between what?
Between what economists call marginal cost on one side and social tolerance on the other. It's all about the breaking point.
Okay, let's make this super simple, because I know not everyone's an economist. We got this brilliant thought experiment from the listener who sent in the topic.
The bubble tea tax?
I love this one.
It's perfect. Okay, so imagine the government decides, look, sugar is a public health crisis. We're going to act.
A reasonable starting point for a policy.
And they decide to slap let's say, a $100 tax on a single cup of bubble tea.
$100? That's steep.
It's incredibly steep. You'd complain, you'd post an angry story on social media for sure, but you might still buy one on a special occasion. You'd, tolerate it.
That's the first step down the slope. It's painful, but it's manageable. The social tolerance is high enough. But what happens when the government gets a little too confident? Right. What if next year they say 100 wasn't enough, we're making it $500 a cup?
Now the equation changes entirely.
Oh, completely. You're not just going to grumble anymore. You are going to actively rebel. You're going to find someone making it in their garage for cash. You'll protest in the streets.
You might even vote to change the government. That's the crucial part.
Yes. And that exact moment, that huge collective pushback where everyone says enough is enough, that's what we're digging into today.
That is the market's automatic balancing mechanism. It's the point where the cost of complying with the rule finally and dramatically exceeds the public's willingness to put up with it.
I love the term we're using for it, the angry equilibrium. It's not a gentle stop, it's a crash.
It's a collision. Because a market isn't a neat spreadsheet. It's millions of emotional, irrational people all negotiating what they're willing to pay and how much pain they're willing to take. When you push that pain too high, the market corrects itself, and it's almost never gentle.
So that's our mission for the Sip and Talk. We're going to unpack this whole idea. Is the end of the slope a controlled stop, or is it always a catastrophic, system-breaking crash?
We'll look at everything from Roman emperors to Coca-Cola CEOs, and we'll bring it all the way to the biggest slippery slope debate of our time, AI regulation in 2026.
We are going to try and figure out how to spot that cliff before we all drive right off it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start by digging into the slope itself. Because it feels like in 2026, the idea has really evolved. It's not just some abstract thing you learn about in a logic class anymore.
Not at all. We really have to move beyond seeing it as that simple fallacy. Modern political science, you look at research coming out now, like from the Journal of Politics last year, they don't see it as a fallacy. They see it as a very real policy feedback mechanism.
Okay, can you break that down? Policy feedback mechanism. What does that mean in plain English for us?
Think about it like this. When a government passes a small, moderate, and maybe even justifiable first policy, let's say a small regulation on a very specific type of illegal AI.
Okay, something most people would agree with.
Right. That policy doesn't just exist on its own. It creates an infrastructure. It sets a legal precedent. It establishes a government agency or a department with a budget to enforce it.
I see where this is going.
Once that whole apparatus is in place, it becomes so much easier politically and just administratively to pass the next slightly more extreme policy.
Because the bureaucracy is already there, and a bureaucracy's main job is to, well, justify its own existence.
Exactly. It needs to keep regulating to keep its budget. So the initial policy isn't just a rule, it's a stepping stone that greases the rails for the next step down the slope. It normalizes the whole idea of intervention.
And that is the absolute core of the modern fear in tech, right? The headlines are all about this. If we let the government regulate AI-generated financial scams today.
Which everyone agrees they should.
Of course. But the fear is, will that same mechanism they build be used 5 years from now to require, I don't know, a government permit just to share a meme or run your own small open source model?
That is the fear. And it's fueling this huge tug of war in the free market right now. You have these two incredibly powerful camps with completely opposite ideas about who should be in control.
So let's look at Camp 1, the pro-market, anti-intervention crowd.
These are the automatic pilot people. Their core belief, their whole argument, is that efficiency is the best balancer. The market is a complex, self-optimizing system, and the best thing the government can do is just get out of the way.
Don't touch the knob, let it fly.
Let it fly. And this is not just some academic debate. There are literally trillions of dollars at stake. I saw a report from Bloomberg just this year saying that global spending on just the infrastructure for AI, we're talking chips, data centers, cooling systems, it's already blown past $500 billion. And the total industry value is estimated at something like $2.5 trillion. The anti-intervention camp says that overregulation, driven by this slippery slope fear, is the biggest threat to that entire economic engine. You stifle it, and you slow down progress for everyone.
Their argument is that the market just adapts faster than any government committee ever could.
That's their real-world evidence. You look at reports from, say, Goldman Sachs. They point out that true economic resilience doesn't come from government guidance. It comes from how quickly corporations and supply chains can adapt on their own to sudden shocks, like new tariffs or geopolitical crises. The market finds the most efficient path way faster than a government can draw a new plan.
Okay, so that's Camp 1. But then you have the complete opposite side, Camp 2.
The pro-interventionists, the necessary guardrails argument. They look at the market and they don't see a perfect, self-correcting machine. They see something that, if you leave it completely alone, will inevitably slide into chaos.
Into things like massive speculative bubbles or monopolies that kill all competition.
Precisely. Their fundamental claim is that externalities need correction. If a company pursuing profit creates massive social costs like pollution or systemic financial risk, or even the healthcare costs from that bubble tea, the market on its own has no incentive to fix that.
Society pays the bill for their profits.
Society pays the bill. And policy has to step in to correct that imbalance. In 2026, you're hearing these warnings loud and clear about AI. JP Morgan put out a note about the risk of a new tech bubble, like the dot-com bust in 2000. All this money is pouring into AI. But if it doesn't start generating real, sustainable revenue soon, that bubble could pop and take the whole economy down with it. That's a catastrophic market failure.
And this is where the big global institutions come in, right? Like the IMF.
Exactly. The IMF is looking at pretty sluggish global growth, around 3%, and they're saying active policy isn't optional. It's vital. You have to actively manage these things to build up buffers against market volatility.
So for the interventionists, the regulation isn't the thing causing the slide. It's the guardrail meant to prevent the market from crashing all on its own.
It's a completely different philosophy. One side says, trust the millions of individual actors to find the best outcome. The other side says, if you only trust the individual actors, their pursuit of private profit will cause systemic harm that only a central authority can fix.
So one side fears the government sliding toward control, and the other side fears the market sliding toward collapse.
That's the tension. And it's at the heart of every single major policy debate we're having right now.
Okay, so that philosophical tension is really clear. But let's move away from theory and look at what actually happens when an institution, whether it's a government or a giant company, just ignores the feedback and keeps on sliding.
This is where we see the crash, where the system finally hits that angry equilibrium.
And these case studies are so important because they show it's not some neat correction. It's often violent, chaotic, and leads to total failure.
We have to start with the biggest one, the macro disaster, the debasement of currency in the Roman Empire.
This is the ultimate boiling the frog scenario, isn't it? And it's driven by something you mentioned earlier, institutional inertia.
Absolutely. The problem for Rome was pretty simple on the surface. They had a gigantic military to pay, massive public works projects, they had to feed the population.
They were constantly broke.
Constantly. The hard solution would have been to cut spending or raise taxes, which is politically unpopular. The easy solution, the slippery slope, was to just debase the currency.
What does that mean exactly, debase the currency?
They took their main silver coin, the denarius. At the beginning of the empire, it was about 95% pure silver. To get more money, they started melting them down and mixing in cheaper metals like copper.
Ah, so out of the silver for one pure coin, they could now mint 2 or 3 debased coins.
Exactly. It's like printing money in the ancient world. And for the government, in the short term, it looked like a miracle. The financial reports were beautiful. They suddenly had all this cash to spend.
But that's the trap of institutional inertia. Because it worked so well at first, they just kept doing it.
They became addicted to it. And the slide got faster and faster over the centuries. That 95% silver content dropped to 85%. Then it plunged to 50%, then 20%. By the end, in some periods, the coins were basically copper slugs with a thin silver wash, maybe 2 to 5% silver.
So at some point, people have to notice they're being handed fake money. Where does the angry equilibrium hit?
It explodes. The market just completely breaks. The two groups who are most sensitive to the value of money merchants and soldiers, they realized they were being paid in worthless junk.
And they didn't just complain, did they?
They actively refused to accept the coins. Imagine you're a farmer selling a cart of grain, and the government buyer tries to pay you with a bag of what is essentially copper tokens. You'd say no. You'd demand gold or barter or anything of real value.
So commerce just stops.
It grinds to a halt. You get mass hyperinflation because the face value of the money is meaningless. Prices for bread and oil go through the roof. The government, desperate, tried to impose these brutal price controls, but it was too late.
You can't force people to trust something they know is worthless.
You can't. The slope didn't end in a soft landing or a minor recession. It ended in total institutional collapse and was a major factor in the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The equilibrium was found through a complete and violent systemic overhaul.
Wow. So if that's the political catastrophe, let's look at the corporate version. This one is almost comical in how badly they misread their customers. Coca-Cola's new Coke.
This is the perfect example of ignoring what we call emotional value because you're trapped by your own data.
The classic data trap.
A spectacular one. The executives at Coke were completely obsessed with the fact that Pepsi was gaining market share, and it was largely because of the Pepsi challenge.
The blind taste tests.
Yes. And the data from those tests was very clear and very consistent. When people didn't know which was which, they tended to prefer the sweeter taste of Pepsi.
So the executives, being rational, data-driven people,
they made what they thought was a rational, data-driven decision. The logical next step on their corporate slide was, let's discard our 99-year-old classic formula and launch new Coke, which we have scientifically engineered in a lab to be sweeter and to win these taste tests.
The decision was based purely on the numbers. What could possibly go wrong?
Everything. They executed the slide perfectly, but the crash into the angry equilibrium was volcanic. They completely failed to account for the emotional value.
The nostalgia, the brand identity, the Americana of it all.
All of it. They thought they were selling sugar water, but they were selling a cultural icon. Consumers didn't just dislike the new taste. They felt profoundly betrayed.
And the reaction wasn't just quiet boycotts, it was fury.
Unprecedented fury. The company's headquarters was getting thousands of angry calls a day. News crews were filming people pouring cans of new Coke into the gutter. It was a literal, public, passionate market rebellion.
They were dumping it in the streets.
The social tolerance for their change ran out almost instantly. The company was forced to completely reverse course and bring back the original formula, rebranded as Coca-Cola Classic, after just 79 days.
79 days. The financial losses and the damage to their reputation must have been enormous.
Staggering. All because they trusted their lab data more than they trusted their understanding of human beings.
So if you take a step back and look at both Rome and Coca-Cola, what's the big lesson here? I mean, these are the smartest people in their fields, emperors, CEOs. Why did they all drive right off the cliff?
They were caught in the data trap. The Roman financial advisors had reports showing more coins being minted, which looked like success. The Coke executives had spreadsheets showing their new product was scientifically preferred in blind tests.
The data was technically correct.
The data was correct, but it was dangerously incomplete. It left out the most important variable.
Which is?
The market isn't a machine. It is made up of emotional, angry people whose sense of fairness, tradition, and identity can override any rational calculation. When that emotional contract gets violated, you don't get a polite correction, you get a volcanic rebellion.
So the slope ends when the internal data tells the institution it's winning, but the people on the outside feel like they're being cheated.
That's the critical insight. Any intervention, whether it's from a government or a corporation, has to listen not just to what is fiscally efficient or technically possible, but to what the people are actually willing to endure emotionally. If you keep your head buried in your own spreadsheets, that angry equilibrium will always hit you like a complete surprise.
Okay, after the doom and gloom of collapsing empires and corporate faceplants, we should probably bring in some high-level economic philosophy to find some stability here.
Let's bring in the heavyweights.
Yes, let's apply their logic to the biggest, most modern slippery slope of all, AI regulation in 2026.
You can frame this entire debate perfectly by putting F.A. Hayek on one side and John Maynard Keynes on the other. They represent the two absolute poles of this argument over market stability and government control.
Let's start with the champion of non-intervention, Hayek. He would be absolutely terrified of what's happening right now. Right. This is his fatal conceit.
He would see any government attempt to centrally plan the development of AI as the ultimate act of hubris. His entire philosophy was built on what he called the knowledge problem.
The knowledge problem. Remind us what that is.
Hayek argued that the knowledge needed to run an economy. People's preferences, new innovations, local needs, all of it is fragmented and spread out across millions of different people. It's decentralized. Therefore, no central committee or government agency could ever possibly know enough to make efficient decisions for everyone.
So when he looks at AI in 2026, what specifically is the fatal conceit?
It's any government attempt to create, say, a detailed AI development blueprint for the entire country, or trying to set up complex compute allocation metrics.
Deciding which scientists get to use the most powerful supercomputers.
Exactly. Hayek would say that is the fatal conceit. The government believes it knows better than the market where this incredibly complex and fast-moving technology should go. He would insist that AI has to emerge as a spontaneous order, driven by the chaotic but ultimately efficient process of market competition.
And his slippery slope warning would be immediate.
Oh, absolutely. He'd say, if you let them regulate specific AI algorithms today because you're scared of what they might do, tomorrow, that same power will be used to regulate all business decisions for the sake of efficiency. That, for him, is the direct path to the authoritarianism he warned about in The Road to Serfdom. Central planning is always the first step.
Okay, so that's one side. Deep suspicion of the state. Now let's pivot to the other extreme with Keynes.
Keynes is all about stability. His big concern is what he called the effective demand destroyer. He was far less worried about the philosophical purity of the free market and much more concerned with preventing economic collapse and human suffering in the here and now.
He didn't trust the market to fix itself, basically.
He thought markets were fundamentally irrational, driven by emotion, animal spirits, as he called them, and they were prone to collapsing into depressions that required a massive actor, the state, to step in and save the day.
So how does he view the AI revolution?
He would be intensely worried about the speed of the disruption if AI leads to rampant, widespread technological unemployment.
Millions of people losing their jobs to automation all at once.
Right. Suddenly, all those newly unemployed people stop spending money. And if enough people stop spending, aggregate demand, the total amount of spending in the economy collapses. That is the market sliding into a depression all on its own. It's a massive market failure.
So his solution isn't to ban AI, it's to manage the shockwave.
Precisely. For a Keynesian, the government must intervene with fiscal tools to maintain stability. That could mean something like an AI tax on companies that replace workers with automation, with the revenue used to fund retraining programs, or massive government subsidies for industries that are creating new human jobs.
It's not about control for control's sake.
No, it's about providing the minimum control necessary for free enterprise to operate. It's about keeping the economic engine from seizing up completely.
And this philosophical clash defines pretty much every AI policy debate we're having in 2026.
It really does. You can see it in the details. On regulation, the Hayekians demand the rule of law, meaning simple, universal rules that apply to everyone equally. like safety standards for all AI models, not rules that target specific companies.
Well, the Keynesians want discretionary intervention.
Yes, they want the government to have the flexibility to change taxes or subsidies on the fly based on the latest unemployment numbers or what competitors are doing.
What about the fuel for all this, the data?
A huge dividing line. A Hayekian would say data and privacy are just commodities that should be traded freely on the market. If you want to use a free social media app in exchange for your data, that's a rational choice between two consenting parties.
But the interventionists see it differently.
The modern Keynesian view is that data is becoming a public good that needs to be regulated to prevent monopolies. If one or two giant companies control all the useful training data, then there's no real competition. So the government has to step in to break up that power.
And we can see these two philosophies in actual policies today.
Absolutely. The Hayekian impulse is what's behind the push for open source AI models like Meta's Llama series. The idea is if the code is open for everyone, no single company can monopolize it.
And the Keynesian side is what gave us things like the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act.
Exactly. That's a top-down precautionary framework that grades AI systems by risks and requires government oversight. It's an attempt to plan for and prevent systemic failure before it can even happen.
But here's where it gets really complicated, and it's something I find fascinating. The strong reformers paradox.
This is the twist. The paradox is that the more powerful a government becomes at intervening, at providing that Keynesian protection, the more likely it is to be captured by the very special interests it's supposed to be regulating.
So the big tech companies don't fight all regulation. They want regulation that helps them.
Of course. They want rules with high compliance costs that crush smaller startups, or regulations that limit their own liability while creating huge barriers to entry for new competitors. This lobbying creates that institutional inertia we talked about with Rome.
So the intervention that was supposed to stop the market from sliding toward collapse instead creates a political slide that favors the powerful, and that makes it impossible to stop safely.
And that's why this is so difficult. It's not just a clean economic debate. It's about power, human nature, and how systems can be captured. It's why that slope so often slides right past the ideal stopping point.
Okay, this brings us right back to our listener's original point, which was so sharp. Why can't we just stop safely?
It's the million-dollar question.
The argument was that the slope has to have a natural limit. People will vote, they'll protest, they'll just refuse to buy a product. Voting with your feet. That marginal resistance should be the wall, shouldn't it?
It should be. In a perfect world with perfect information, it would be. But there are these huge structural problems that prevent a safe, easy stop. The two biggest are information lag time and nonlinear risk.
Okay, let's break down information lag time first. Why is the feedback so slow?
Well, a free market works because price signals are instant. If the price of apples goes up, you immediately know to buy oranges instead. The feedback is right there.
Right.
But policy feedback is slow and messy. It's not a price tag. It's a gradual buildup of public anger. It's shifting voter sentiment in polls. It's a slow decline in consumer trust. By the time the government gets a clear signal that the public is furious, they're often way past the actual breaking point.
They raise a tax, and then they have to wait for the next election cycle to see if they get punished for it. That's the lag.
That's the lag. And it's a huge problem. Now, add to that the idea of nonlinear risk.
Meaning the reaction isn't always proportional to the action.
Exactly. A government might raise that sugar tax from 5% to 10% and then to 15%. And each time people grumble, but they mostly absorb it. The resistance is low and linear.
But then they push it just 1% more to 16.
And that tiny 1% increase happens to coincide with a sudden spike in gas prices and maybe a little bit of bad news about the housing market. And that 1% tax becomes the final straw that breaks the camel's back.
And you get a massive, disproportionate, nonlinear explosion of protest.
Correct. The pain is cumulative. So the policymakers are essentially driving in the dark. They're testing how much pressure the public can take, and they can't see that nonlinear cliff until they're already over the edge. They aren't finding an equilibrium. They're stress testing a system until it breaks.
And this leads right into what you call the paternalism paradox, the Mahan-Coffey dilemma.
This is the fundamental contradiction at the heart of so much intervention. The government steps in, claiming paternalism. We're protecting you from yourselves. We have the data from the World Health Organization on diabetes, and our big data models predict we can save the healthcare system billions.
They use data to justify the action.
But the paradox is they don't actually know the real human resistance point until after the policy is already in place. The coffee is already hot. The tax is already being collected. The new regulatory agency is already staffed and funded.
So by the time the public feedback, the protests, the anger finally arrives, it's too late.
And it feels less like the government is trying to find a balance and more like they're testing your servitude. They're not asking, what is the optimal policy for societal well-being? They're asking, how much can we get away with before they revolt?
They're testing how much we can endure, not where we should stop.
And this is what leads to Hayek's most terrifying warning, the problem of irreversibility.
Meaning, even if they go too far and are forced to pull back, the damage is already done.
The damage is done, and it's structural. Let's say the people riot and the government repeals the bubble tea tax. The tax might be gone, but the Federal Bureau of Sugar Consumption they created to enforce it probably isn't. It has a budget, it has employees, it has a political interest in its own survival.
That institutional inertia, again.
It's always there.
Yeah.
So the system doesn't just snap back to its previous state of freedom. The precedent has been set. The regulatory power has been established. And on a human level, we're really bad at stopping this early because of something called loss aversion.
We feel losses more intensely than gains.
Way more intensely. So we tolerate tiny losses. A small tax increase, a minor erosion of privacy, because the initial pain is small and manageable. We don't mount a huge resistance early on. By the time the cumulative burden is so overwhelming that it finally triggers that angry equilibrium, the systemic damage is already deep and often irreversible.
You can see this perfectly on the Laffer curve in economics.
A perfect visualization. As you raise the tax rate, as you slide down the slope, government revenue goes up, but only to a point. Once the rate gets too high, revenue plummets because people just leave the system, they use the black market, they move their money, they stop working as hard.
That's the wall. That's the angry equilibrium.
But notice that the wall is reached through a systemic overhaul, through collapse or a regime change, not through a safe, rational, gentle braking process. The tool that was meant to prevent market failure, government intervention, often becomes the very thing that prevents the slide from starting safely.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. Emperors, economists, AI. My brain is definitely feeling that comfortable heat you talked about.
So let's bring it all the way down to earth, to a microcosm of this entire struggle that almost everyone has experienced.
The office fridge.
The office fridge, a magnificent tiny laboratory for market failure and regulatory overreach.
Okay, let's start with pure Hayekian freedom. No rules for the fridge. What happens?
The tragedy of the commons. Within a week, it's filled with moldy leftovers, someone's half-eaten yogurt from 3 months ago, all the communal oat milk is gone. It becomes completely unusable. The free market for lunch has failed spectacularly.
So we need intervention. Someone steals the oat milk, there's outrage, and the administrative department, our government, steps in.
They enact the first moderate policy. A simple sign. Please label your food. A necessary guardrail to restore basic market function.
But then, the slippery slope begins. The institutional inertia. The admin department now has a fridge czar whose job depends on fridge policy.
And that first simple rule didn't stop all the problems, so they have to do more to justify their existence. They roll out a complex new policy document. All food must be labeled with a color-coded sticker indicating purchase date, contents, and a mandatory disposal date. The fridge is now subject to random inspections.
And the employees start to panic. Today it's labels, tomorrow they'll be regulating what brands of yogurt we're allowed to bring in or installing a camera to enforce designated fridge opening times.
That is the slippery slope in action, driven by the regulator's need to demonstrate its own value and expand its power.
So the answer can't be no rules, but it also can't be all the rules. Where is that sweet spot?
The balance is what people are now calling the dynamic guardrail concept. The best analogy is a traffic light.
Okay.
A traffic light absolutely restricts your individual freedom to just blow through an intersection whenever you want. But by imposing that small, predictable restriction, it guarantees the collective freedom for everyone to travel safely and efficiently. The rule only exists to enable the system to function.
It's the difference between regulation for safety and regulation for control.
Yeah, precisely. And this is the trend we're seeing proposed for AI regulation in 2026. This idea of dynamic guardrails. It's a compromise between Hayek and Keynes.
So what does that look like in practice?
You grant maximum freedom for innovation, let developers and the market run wild, but you establish clear, predefined lines, and the moment an AI model crosses one of those lines and presents a systemic risk, the guardrail kicks in and intervention is forced.
For example, an open source model is fine. until it becomes powerful enough to teach someone how to make a bomb or a bioweapon. Then the guardrail activates.
Exactly. It's a minimal safety rule that's only applied dynamically when a specific danger threshold is met. It's an attempt to have the best of both worlds, the Hayekian freedom to create, with the Keynesian protection against catastrophic collapse.
It's an imperfect solution, I'm sure.
It's a perpetual conflict. Hayek will always fear that any control will stifle creativity. Keynes will always fear that no control will mean everyone crashes. The dynamic guardrail is just the latest, best attempt to navigate that permanent tension.
Whew. Okay, after all that talk about Rome and AI, I'm looking at this half-sweet, light-ice bubble tea on my desk, and my whole relationship with it has changed.
Oh, really? Are you contemplating the sugar-level slippery slope of your afternoon treat?
I absolutely am. This is my personal application of our entire conversation. I used to have this fear, if I drink this bubble tea today, that's the start of my failed diet slide. Tomorrow it'll be high-calorie food. The next day I'm on the couch with a family-sized bag of chips too, and it's all over. Total sloth.
The classic slippery slope fallacy applied to snacking.
Yes. But I just had this epiphany. My body actually has its own internal free market mechanism. When I drink this, I know that the resulting sugar crash is going to make me feel sluggish and unproductive for the rest of the afternoon.
That's the cost.
That's the cost. The pain of zero work efficiency is my market's automatic pushback. So I won't slide all the way to becoming a couch potato because my own system will scream, "Stop, the cost is too high. You need to go to the gym to reestablish equilibrium."
Your marginal resistance kicks in. The negative consequence of the slide forces the corrective action.
I have a similar one, actually. It's my tolerance for your cold jokes.
Hey, I can start regulating my humor now. My initial Hayekian fear was that if I laughed at just one of your jokes, you would see it as a green light, and this studio would slide into becoming a full-time stand-up comedy club. The institutional inertia of your hosting power.
A terrifying thought, I'm sure.
But then I realized the market self-regulates. If your jokes get too bad, the audience numbers will drop. My mood will darken significantly.
That is a very powerful market signal, yes.
Exactly. That market feedback naturally ensures you won't slide all the way off the cliff into becoming a full-time comedian. It's the natural check on your power.
So, Sip&Talkers, the takeaway here is don't be terrified of every little slide in your life or every small policy change that worries you. Just remember that the angry equilibrium is always there as a backstop. There's always a cost, and that cost creates resistance.
The key, of course, is that you have to be willing to listen to the feedback. Unlike the Roman emperors who were so focused on their own short-term data that they just kept debasing the currency until it was worthless copper.
Okay, that is all the time we have for today. We hope we've left your brain with that comfortable, warm feeling of a good workout.
Go out and enjoy your own personal free markets.
Before we sign off, here's one final thought to chew on this week. In a world where AI is getting better and better at predicting human behavior and helping to make regulatory decisions, is our definition of equilibrium itself changing? Are we creating a system where AI is both the cause of the instability and the central planner trying to fix it?
Something to ponder.
A deep thought for the week ahead. All right, thank you so much for joining us for another Sip and Talk. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, do us a favor and check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life. He's got great memes and some amazing travel vlogs.
Until next time.
See you next time.